Welcome to Wild West Chronicles. Today, I'm going to share with you a story that is both deeply touching and full of tension. Let's listen closely and experience it together. The sun hadn't yet climbed above the distant ridge when Silas McGraw stepped out onto the porch, coffee cup in hand, the rim chipped and stained from years of mornings just like this one. His boots made that familiar creak as they found their way to the edge of the wooden boards. He stood still, a statue against the haze of dawn, watching the horizon change color like it did every day. Soft gold into pale fire, bleeding into a sky too big for any man to measure. Out here, time moved slow. It wasn't counted in hours or minutes. It moved in seasons, in dry riverbeds and cattle berths, in fences that wore out and had to be mended again. That was the rhythm of Silas's life now. A quiet one, predictable, empty, some might say, but not to him. Solitude was a kind of peace. And peace, in his experience, only ever came after everything else had been burned to the ground. The ranch sat on the edge of the desert, too far for neighbors, too dry for wheat, but just enough grass to keep a few dozen head fat and moving. He ran it alone. Had for 15 years, ever since he'd buried the past and let it stay buried. No wife, no children, just the wind, the dust, and the occasional crow that watched from the fence posts like it knew things he didn't. He sipped the coffee, black and bitter as gunmetal, and listened. Nothing but cicadas and wind. Maybe a coyote far off, the kind of quiet that some folks feared, but he'd learned to live inside it. That's why it struck him strange, the way the horses acted before midday. They spooked first, just after he'd let them out to graze near the well. Normally calm, the gelding tossed its head and whinnied sharp enough to catch his ear. The others shifted, stamping and twitching like a storm was coming, but the sky was clean. No clouds, no buzzards, just heat. He grabbed his rifle anyway, habit. Stepped down from the porch, dirt crunching underfoot, and followed the trail to the well. That's where he found her. She was sprawled half in the dust, half against the stones of the well wall, like she'd collapsed, trying to reach the water. Her skin was burned raw where the sun had had its way, and a crust of dried blood ran from her hip to her thigh, the fabric torn and matted with sand. Long, dark hair tangled around her shoulders. Her breathing was shallow. One arm was stretched forward, fingertips grazing the dry ground, the other curled protectively against her ribs. Silas stopped, 10 paces short. His hand tightened on the rifle stock. Apache. She was young, maybe 15, maybe 17. Hard to tell, and that didn't matter much. What mattered was what people would think if they saw her here. What kind of trouble could find him just for standing near her, much less helping? He stood there a long minute, jaw tight. Could have turned around. Should have, maybe. Left her for the sun. Left her to whatever fate had dropped her here, like a dying bird under his roof. But then she made a sound. Barely a whisper. Something like a gasp. Her fingers moved. She wasn't dead yet. Silas cursed under his breath. He slung the rifle back over his shoulder and stepped forward, crouching beside her. Up close, he saw how bad it really was. Bullet wound, clean through the side, not fresh but not healing either. Infection was brewing. Her lips were cracked and dry, her eyes half-lidded, but when he touched her shoulder, those eyes snapped open, dark, wide, fierce, even in pain. She tried to move, but her body didn't obey. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but only a dry croak came out. "Easy," Silas muttered. "Ain't gonna hurt you." She didn't understand. Or maybe she didn't believe him. But she stopped fighting. Her head rolled back. He carried her. Not far, just enough to get her into the house, and laid on the old cot in the back room. It wasn't meant for guests, hadn't been used in years, but he dusted it off with a towel and laid her down gentle. She was light, too light. He boiled water, cleaned the wound. She didn't cry out. not even when he dug out what was left of the bullet with trembling fingers. He stitched it, slow and rough, and wrapped it tight, gave her sips of water once she could swallow, and left her to rest while he sat outside on the porch again, this time without coffee. Silas stared at the well, its stones still dark with blood. He knew the look of a hunted animal. He'd worn it himself, once, long ago. He remembered the girl he used to have, Sarah. Blonde curls and a wild streak. She died in a fever winter when the medicine wagon never came. He remembered holding her small hand as it went still. Remembered the way he couldn't stop the shaking in his arms after. That helplessness. He'd stayed with a man, so maybe that's why he didn't send the girl away. Maybe that's why he didn't tell himself no and haul her back to the desert. He'd seen too much loss already. Let someone else turn their back. She slept for the better part of 2 days, woke only for water, or when the pain got sharp. She never spoke, just watched him with those eyes, dark and quiet, measuring. On the 3rd day, she sat up. "You're gonna rip your stitches doing that," Silas grunted from his place near the stove. She said nothing. He walked over, poured her a cup of broth. "Don't get any ideas. You're not walking out of here today." She took the cup, slowly, drank. When she was done, she looked up at him and said, voice hoarse, "Why, help me." He blinked, not at the question, at the clarity in it. English, clean and sharp. Not what he expected. He rubbed his jaw. Didn't see any reason not to. She stared at him a while longer, then nodded once. Simple, accepting. No thanks, no fear, just acknowledgement. She gave her name the next evening. "Naira." "Silas," he replied. That was all the talking they did for another day. Then the questions came. She asked if anyone saw her. He shook his head. Asked if he'd told anyone. He hadn't. She asked if there were others on the ranch. He said no, always no. After a while, Naira started moving on her own. Limping, slow, but she was strong. Too strong for someone left to die. She helped water the horses one morning and froze at the sound of distant hooves. Silas caught it too. Just one rider. He walked to the barn, hand on the Winchester hanging by the door. When the rider came into view, Silas's gut soured. Tommy Reeve, young, dumb, loud-mouthed, worked cattle for one of Treadwell's crews. Trouble on a good day. "Howdy, Silas," Tommy called, dismounting like he owned the dirt. "What brings you all the way out here?" Silas asked, voice even. "Boss sent me to ask if you seen any Apaches snooping around. We had some livestock go missing. Treadwell's in a mood." "Don't see anyone round here 'cept birds and lizards." Tommy spat and laughed. "Figures. If you do see one, you better shoot first, ask later. Got a bounty going now." Silas's jaw ticked. "That's so. Girl, they say, took something from the big house. Jewelry, I heard. Treadwell's heirloom or something. Worth a fortune. Half the boys in town already saddling up." He forced a chuckle. "A girl that stupid probably already dead in the desert." Tommy grinned. "Wouldn't that be a mercy?" The words left a sour taste in Silas's mouth. After the boy rode off, Silas stood in the barn, hands still wrapped around the rifle stock. So she hadn't told him everything. He found her by the corral, staring out across the plains. She didn't look back as he approached. "Jewelry?" he asked. She flinched. "I didn't steal it." "Didn't say you did." Silence stretched. "It was a gift," she said at last. "From someone who wasn't supposed to give it. They lied to cover the shame." He believed her. Don't know why. Just did. Maybe because her voice didn't shake. Maybe because liars always looked you in the eye too long, and she couldn't meet his at all. "They'll come for you," he said. "I know. Then you'll need to decide if you're going to run again or stand." She didn't answer, but he saw her hand tighten around the brooch she wore on a string around her neck. Silver, finely worked, sun and feather motifs etched into it. No way she made that herself. That night, Silas checked his traps, re-oiled his rifle, tended to the horses like always. But something in the air had shifted, and the well, where he'd found her, still carried the faint stain of blood, a warning painted in silence. He didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but from the sense that peace, once again, was riding fast out of reach. The desert night had teeth. It bit through the boards of the house and settled in Silas's bones as he sat by the hearth, watching the fire's last orange fingers claw their way up the walls. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance, but he barely noticed. He'd heard them all his life. What he was listening for now wasn't wild or four-legged. It was hooves, voices, trouble. Naira slept in the back room. At least he hoped she slept. She moved light, like wind through reeds, and sometimes he wasn't sure if she was truly there or a memory woven out of guilt and dust. But the bandage on her hip said she was real enough. The pain in her eyes when she'd talked about the brooch, about the shame and the lies, there was no faking that. He'd meant to send her away after patching her up, meant to wash his hands of it, but every day she stayed. She chipped away at the wall he'd built around himself, not with words, with presence, with quiet dignity, and a stare that made him feel like maybe the world hadn't gone completely to hell. The next morning, he found her already outside when he stepped off the porch, leaning against the fence post with a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her hair was down, a mess of waves catching the early light, and her face was still pale, but her posture had a quiet defiance to it that hadn't been there before. "You shouldn't be on your feet," he said. "I couldn't sleep." He walked past her, whistling to the horses, tossing feed into their trough. She watched him for a while, then said, "You knew they were lying." "Didn't need to. I just knew they were white and angry and armed. That's usually enough." A shadow passed across her face. "They'll come for it." He didn't have to ask what she meant. The brooch. It hung now from a new leather cord around her neck, tucked just inside her shirt. He'd seen her touch it in the dark, like a prayer. It wasn't about the silver. Not really. It was about who gave it to her, and what it meant. "You still haven't told me who gave it," he said. She looked at him. Not defensive, not afraid. Just steady. "Treadwell's daughter," she said. "Anna." He blinked. That name hadn't passed his ears in years. Didn't even know she was still around. "She met my brother. He saved her when her horse fell crossing the bluff trail. She followed him after that. Secret meetings. I went with him once. She gave me the brooch when she left. Said she couldn't keep it without betraying her family. It was proof." "Proof of what?" Naira's jaw tightened. "That they were more than talk." He shook his head slowly. "You don't give a brooch like that to a friend. Not one your pa's gonna send a posse over." "She loved him," she said, "and she was too afraid to say so. Her father found out, saw me wearing the brooch, and made his choice." Silas leaned against the fence. The sun was higher now, warming the boards. The morning chill was fading. "Whole town's been swallowing that story like warm whiskey," he muttered. "An Apache girl steals from the richest man in 50 miles. Makes for good gossip." "He wanted war," she said. "He'll get it." He looked at her then. Really looked. The girl who'd stumbled bleeding into his life had grown sharper in just a few days, sharpened by truth and loss and the weight of things she couldn't undo. "War doesn't come in all at once," he said. "It comes in pieces. One rider, then 3, then 50. You need to be ready." "I've always been ready." He didn't doubt it. That afternoon, he took her into the barn. Dust floated in golden shafts between the beams, and the smell of dry hay and old leather hung thick in the air. He rummaged through an old crate and came out with a .22, light and clean. He handed it to her. "Ever use one?" She nodded. He believed her. He set up bottles along the fence, pointed to them, and stood back. She raised the rifle, slow and sure, fired, missed the first, nicked the second, hit the third dead center. She didn't smile, didn't show off, just adjusted and kept firing. "Good," he said. "We'll keep practicing." She reloaded with practiced hands. That night, he cooked stew. Naira barely ate the first day. Now she cleaned her bowl and asked for more. He served it without comment. "What happens if they come?" she asked. "They'll expect me to give you up," he said. "And you won't?" "No." "Why?" He stirred the fire, tossed on another log. "Maybe I'm tired of doing nothing." She didn't press him, just leaned back and stared at the flames like she was trying to see the future in them. 2 days passed. Then 3. They worked. Built fences, hauled water, sharpened tools. She limped less, moved faster, carried more. She didn't smile, but sometimes her face softened, and he thought that was enough. Then came the dust cloud. Late afternoon. Flat sky, no wind. But there it was, rising just over the ridge. Not a storm, not cattle. Too fast, too narrow. Silas stepped onto the porch with his rifle slung low. Naira followed behind him, already reaching under her coat for the .22. The rider came into view. Not Tommy this time. Older man, lean and red-faced, hard eyes. He stopped a good distance from the house and raised a hand in lazy greeting. Silas didn't wave back. "You Silas McGraw?" the man called. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Prentice." "I ride for Treadwell." "Should have guessed. What do you want?" "Boss is real anxious about a piece of property gone missing. Valuable. Sent me to ask polite before things get less polite." Silas said nothing. Prentice shifted in the saddle. "We got word someone matching a description was seen near your land. Might have been a mirage, might have been real. Either way, boss wants his property back. Says he's owed." "Pretty sure people ain't property, Prentice." The rider's smile was thin and cold. "No, but justice is, and he paid for it." Silas walked forward a few steps. "Tell your boss if he wants to talk, he can come himself. But if he sends more riders like you sniffing around, I won't be so friendly." Prentice's eyes narrowed. "That a threat?" "That's a fact." They stared each other down for a long moment. Then Prentice turned his horse. "I'll tell him. But don't expect talk next time. He's already raised a posse." Silas didn't move until the dust cloud was gone. Then he exhaled, looked at Naira. "Time to finish the cellar," he said. She nodded. They worked into the night, digging out the trapdoor under the barn floor, clearing the old root cellar he hadn't touched in years. He found the crates of ammo, the old lanterns, the jerky he'd stashed back when the Comanches still raided. Naira pulled the crates with quiet strength, never asked what came next. She already knew. That night, they didn't sleep much. He sat on the porch, oiling the long rifle. She sat near the door, carving a strip of wood with a dull blade, hands moving in slow, practiced circles. "You ever kill anyone?" she asked softly. He didn't answer for a long time. "Yeah," he said finally. "Too many." She didn't flinch, just kept carving. Did it help? No. The stars above were cruel and bright. Coyotes howled again, but farther now, as if even they were keeping their distance. The next morning brought no peace. Just dust again. This time, more of it. Silas used the spyglass from the roof of the barn. Counted them. 8 riders. Maybe more behind. He climbed down, heart steady. "They're coming early." Naira tied her hair back and checked the rifle's chamber. "They won't stop." "No," he said, "they won't." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not a girl anymore, but someone forged in heat and pain. Someone ready. He strapped on his belt, loaded his guns, set traps near the fence, checked the nails in the floorboards, locked the feed room from the outside in case they needed cover. By dusk, the ranch was quiet again. But it wouldn't last. He knew that now. They'd come in numbers, they'd come angry. And when they did, this land would drink blood again. Naira sat on the porch beside him as the sky turned copper. "If I die," she said, "don't let them take the brooch." "You won't die," he replied. "You don't know that." "No," he said, "but I've got 50 rounds that say they'll die first." The firelight flickered behind them. The wind picked up, and somewhere out in the dark, the sound of hooves echoed again. This time, it wasn't just one rider, it was many. And they were getting closer. The wind shifted before the sun rose, carrying with it the dry scent of horse sweat and gun oil. Silas knew that smell. It meant men were gathering somewhere close. Not cowhands, not travelers. Men with guns. Men with purpose. It wasn't the scent of cattle moving across the range or a trader's wagon rolling through. This was something more calculated, measured, dangerous. He stepped outside and watched the ridge. It was still quiet, the kind of quiet that settled before storms. Not a single bird in the air, not a buzz of insect. Only the soft creak of the barn door as it swung slightly on its hinges. That sound had comforted him for years, a reminder that things moved slow out here. But now, it grated against his nerves like a warning bell he couldn't silence. He walked the perimeter of the ranch again, for the third time since midnight. Every trap had been set. The fence line was reinforced, patched in the weak spots where old nails had rotted. The cellar was stocked and ready, and the hidden path through the ravine was cleared, just in case they had to vanish in the night. But that wasn't the plan. Not yet. Naira was already awake. She was in the loft, cross-legged in the hay, cleaning her rifle. The sun lit her face in long amber strokes through the slats in the roof. She moved like a shadow, calm and deliberate. Her braid was tighter than usual, pulled back high on her head, exposing the scar along her jaw where the bullet had grazed her weeks ago. She didn't wince as she moved. That pain had settled into her like a familiar friend. "Riders?" she asked without looking up. "Soon," Silas said. "They're close." She finished oiling the rifle and set it beside her. "How many?" "Too many for comfort, not enough to run." She nodded, then looked at him. Her eyes were unreadable in the light, somewhere between defiance and resolve. "I'll fight," she said. "I know." He didn't try to talk her out of it. He'd seen people ready to die before. She wasn't bluffing, wasn't brave for the sake of pride. She had accepted something, somewhere deep inside, and now she would walk through fire without blinking. That made her more dangerous than any of the men who had come with their guns and their thirst for reward. By midday, they could see dust rising again, thicker this time, stretching across the plain like smoke from a dying fire. Silas watched it with the glass and counted 12 riders, spread wide, like they were trying to flank. "Testing the edges," he muttered. He moved Naira to the barn and positioned her where she had the best sight line of the south fence. The ladder was pulled up after her. No one would come that way without getting spotted. Silas returned to the porch, rifle in hand, revolver strapped tight at his side. He sat, waited. The first shot cracked the stillness like lightning through dry timber. It echoed across the ranch, sharp and arrogant. Silas didn't flinch. He didn't fire back. Not yet. He just listened. He could hear the horses stomping on the ridge, the creak of leather saddles, the low mutter of voices trying to spread out quietly. But quiet didn't carry far in a place like this. "Come on, boys," he whispered. "Show yourselves." A second shot rang out, splintering a post near the corral. Still a warning. Still bait. He waited. Then came the shout. "McGraw, we know you're in there! You've got something that don't belong to you." It was Prentice. The same man who'd come riding in days ago, only now he didn't bother pretending at politeness. "Send her out now and no one gets hurt." Silas stood and walked to the edge of the porch. "You tell your men to ride off," he called back, "or they'll be digging graves out here with their own boots." Laughter broke out. Then a third shot. This one punched into the barn wall. Naira didn't respond, didn't move. She was waiting too. She'd been trained well. Silas stepped down from the porch and fired once. Clean, precise. The bullet struck the base of a mesquite tree 20 yards ahead, where one of the riders had tried to crouch low behind it. The man scrambled back, curses flying. "Last warning," Silas called. They didn't answer. They charged. The hooves thundered against the cracked earth, shaking it loose from years of drought and sun. 12 riders came hard and fast, splitting into 3 groups. Silas dropped the first from his right flank. Quick shot to the shoulder, unseated him instantly. Another fired blindly and missed. Naira's shot followed seconds later, sharp and sure, striking one of the lead horses in the leg. The beast screamed and went down, pinning its rider beneath. Gunfire roared. Dust clouds bloomed like wild ghosts. The air turned thick with grit and smoke. Silas moved between cover like he was young again, breathing slow, firing slower. Each shot counted. Each shot mattered. The traps near the corral went off. 2 of the riders, not seeing the barbed pit beneath the loose earth, fell hard and didn't get up. Their horses screamed and fled. The rest pulled back, regrouped behind the low ridge, trading shots with shadows. Then it went quiet again. Silas reloaded behind the old grain cart. Naira signaled from the loft with a mirror flash. Still had bullets. Still watching. Still steady. He waited for the next wave. It didn't come. Instead, a voice rose again, hoarse and angry. "You got no chance, McGraw. We'll bring the whole damn town if we have to." Silas stood, dust streaking his face, sweat dripping into his eyes. "Then bring 'em!" he shouted. "Just means I don't have to go far to finish what you started." More shouting. Then another retreat. This time, they didn't leave completely. Just circled wide, hiding in the scrub and gullies. Watching, waiting for nightfall. Inside the barn, Naira climbed down and sat near the crates of water. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was fast. She looked at Silas when he came in. "You think they'll come back with more?" "They already sent their message. Next time, they won't play games." She drank and wiped her face. "We can still leave," she said. "No," Silas replied. "This is our ground. We hold it. You're not doing this for me anymore." He looked at her, and the silence between them said enough. "I'm doing it for what's right," he said. "And I'm too old to keep running from that." Night fell hard, darker than usual. No moon, just a sky full of cold stars and the sense that somewhere out there, men were sharpening knives in their minds, loading bullets, whispering to their hate. Silas made rounds again. Naira sat near the porch steps, the .22 across her knees. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Then a sound, a whistle, soft, too clean to be wind. Silas snapped around, rifle raised. He scanned the ridge. Another whistle. Higher this time, patterned. Then another. Then silence. Naira stood slowly. "That's not theirs," she said. He looked at her. "Yours?" She didn't answer. Just stepped off the porch and whistled low into the dark. 3 tones, like a lullaby reversed. A moment passed. Then came the answer. Low. Strong. From the east. Then again from the south. Silas gripped his rifle tighter. She turned to him. "They found me." "Your people?" She nodded. "My brother." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. They moved quickly to the barn, lit no fires, stayed low. Naira climbed into the loft again and waited. Silas returned to his post by the porch, but his hands were different now. Not just defensive, expectant. The enemy wouldn't know what was coming. Not yet. At dawn, the riders came. More this time. Maybe 20. Faces hidden behind scarves. Guns raised. They didn't shout warnings. They opened fire. Bullets tore through the ranch, ripping into wood, kicking up clouds of dust and splinters. Silas returned fire from the porch, cutting down 2 before the rest scattered. He dropped to cover and moved, dodging between outbuildings, ducking behind barrels and carts. From the ridge came movement, fast, silent, figures emerging from the shadows like ghosts. Apache warriors, faces painted, bows drawn, rifles raised. They moved through the scrub like wind, and then the world exploded. Arrows found their marks. Bullets whistled from new angles. Panic spread among the posse. Horses bucked and screamed. Men shouted in confusion, realizing too late they were flanked. Silas fired again, picking off the ones who tried to retreat. Naira dropped a man from the loft, clean through the shoulder. Another fell from his horse, clutching his leg, bleeding into the dust. The fight didn't last long. 10 minutes, maybe less. The remaining riders scattered, vanishing into the horizon like whipped dogs. Silas stood amid the silence, gun lowered. He turned and saw Naira on the porch, still standing, eyes wide. Her brother stood beside her now, tall and lean, his face calm but proud. They nodded to each other. No words were needed. The land had spoken, and it had not forgotten how to fight. The ranch smoldered beneath the rising sun, its air thick with the smell of gunpowder, burnt wood, and blood. Smoke drifted in lazy ribbons over the eastern fence, curling from the splintered remains of a hayshed that had caught fire during the last exchange. The breeze pushed it west, carrying with it the echoes of violence, gunfire still hanging in the land's memory like an unfinished prayer. Silence followed now, not the kind of peace that came after a long day's work, but the kind that settled on bones and made even the wind seem hesitant. Silas leaned against the porch beam, a blood-soaked rag clutched to his left arm. The bullet had only grazed him, but it burned something fierce, and he knew better than to ignore it. He hadn't taken a hit like that in years, not since he'd traded outlaws for cattle and pistol grips for fence pliers. But his hands hadn't forgotten. They were still steady, still ruthless when it counted. Today, they had needed to be. Across the yard, 2 Apache warriors walked quietly through the rubble, retrieving arrows and checking the fallen. Most of the men from the posse had scattered, broken and bloodied, their trail of failure already evaporating into the desert. 2 bodies lay covered in old horse blankets near the barn. One had been caught in the trap Silas had buried by the north gate. The other had bled out, trying to crawl away, face down in the dirt just 10 yards from the well. Both were unrecognizable now, not just from wounds, but from the way their faces had contorted in those last seconds. Anger mixed with disbelief, like the earth itself had betrayed them. Naira stood beside her brother under the corral's broken beam. She hadn't said much since the fight ended. The rifle still hung from her shoulder, but her grip was looser now. She was staring at the horizon, eyes narrowed against the wind, as if she could see farther than the rest of them. Her brother, Tohono, spoke in quiet tones with one of the warriors, gestures sharp and purposeful. They hadn't come with an army, just 8, moving like ghosts and striking like thunder. But it had been enough. Silas pushed off the post and walked toward them. Every step ached now. His boots felt heavier than they should. Maybe it was the fight. Maybe it was his years catching up to him all at once. Tohono turned as Silas approached, his expression unreadable. They stood a moment, measuring one another, neither offering a handshake nor a word right away. "You fought well," Tohono said, finally. Silas nodded. "So did your people." Tohono glanced toward the bodies. "They'll come again." "They always do." The young warrior beside him spoke in Apache, voice low and clipped. Tohono answered, then turned back to Silas. "We'll stay through nightfall," he said, "to guard the wounded. Then we return." "You're not taking her with you?" Silas asked. Tohono looked at Naira. "She will choose," he said. "Our blood is strong, but it is not a chain." Naira met their eyes. She walked toward them, slow and quiet, the wind pressing her braid over her shoulder. She stopped between them and took in the scene. Silas, blood still seeping through the rag tied around his sleeve, her brother marked with paint and dust, and behind them, the scorched remains of the barn and the fading tracks of those who had come to take her life. "I won't run anymore," she said. Tohono's brow furrowed. "We can protect you." "You already did," she said, "and now I'll protect this place." He didn't argue. Just looked at her for a long, still moment, then offered a short nod. By dusk, the bodies had been buried. Shallow graves, unmarked. The land wouldn't care for names anyway. It only remembered pain. The Apache warriors shared food, roasted rabbit, beans, cornmeal cakes, passing it without ceremony to Silas, who accepted it with quiet thanks. Naira sat beside the fire, listening as her brother spoke in low tones with the others. She didn't join in, but her presence was easy among them. She belonged, but she was already elsewhere. Her thoughts rooted in the scorched wood of the ranch house and the blood trail that had soaked into its soil. After the fire burned low and the warriors took to sleeping roles or watch posts, Silas and Naira remained awake. "You ever want to leave this place?" she asked. Silas looked out across the land, toward the dark ridges in the distance. "Used to," he said, "but every time I did, something pulled me back." "What was it?" He took a breath, let it out slow. "Debt," she frowned. "You owed someone?" "Myself," he said. "There were things I didn't do, things I should have said, people I failed. And this land, it remembers." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "Do you think it remembers me?" "I think it'll never forget you." Morning came with the sound of riders. Different rhythm. Faster. Sharper. Not the cautious creep of bounty men. These were mounted for speed. For war. Silas shot upright from his cot in the barn and was already lacing his boots when Naira burst in. "6 riders," she said. "South Trail. Tohono saw dust 10 minutes ago." He strapped on his revolver and threw his coat over his shoulders, moving with a speed that belied his age. The Apache warriors were already at the ridge, crouched low, weapons ready. Through the glass, he saw them. Not bounty hunters, not drifters. Deputies. Treadwell had raised the stakes. They wore polished badges, riding in with the arrogance of law. A red banner fluttered from the lead horse, a sign of sanctioned force. Legal justice, and with it, they carried a wagon behind them, meant for prisoners, or bodies. Silas stepped out, rifle in hand, but lowered. They stopped at the edge of the property line, where the post had once stood before being shot to pieces 2 days prior. "McGraw!" the lead deputy shouted. "We've got a writ signed by Judge Carlin. You're harboring a fugitive wanted for theft and assault. We're here to take her into custody." "She's not going anywhere," Silas said. The deputy held up the paper. "This gives us the right." "Funny," Silas said. "Didn't see any of you when your boys lit my barn on fire and killed my livestock." The deputy didn't blink. "That's not part of the report." "Of course it ain't." One of the younger deputies raised his rifle slightly, just a twitch, but it was enough. Behind Silas, Naira stepped forward and raised hers in kind. The Apache warrior shifted. "Standoff." "You gonna shoot a badge, McGraw?" the deputy said. "You know what that means." "I know exactly what it means," Silas said. "It means this land will see another grave, maybe 6. A long silence followed. Wind kicked dust between them. The horses twitched. Then, a slow clapping sound came from behind the deputies. A new rider approached. Dark coat, clean boots, wide hat pulled low. Elias Treadwell. He trotted up and dismounted like a preacher taking the pulpit. "Well now," he said, voice smooth as snake oil. "What a fine gathering. Thought I'd come see justice served myself." Silas didn't move. His jaw clenched. Treadwell walked forward, the deputies parting for him. He pulled a silver pocket watch from his vest, flicked it open, checked the time. "I'd hate to waste a full morning, McGraw. You hand the girl over, and I'll be charitable. No charges, no trouble." Naira stepped forward. "I didn't steal it." He looked at her like a man examining a roach. "You wore what wasn't yours. That's all the court needs. It was given to me." "No one will believe that," he said. "I don't need them to." She pulled the brooch from her shirt and held it in her hand. Then she turned it over, pressed her thumb to a small groove on the back. The clasp popped open, and inside, hidden from plain view, was a tiny piece of paper. Folded, yellowed, sealed with wax. Treadwell's face changed. She held it up. "I didn't read it," she said, "but I know whose name is on it." The deputy stepped forward. What is that?" "A letter," Naira said, "from Anna Treadwell, given to me the night she left." Treadwell's composure faltered. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Silas raised his voice. "You hear that? That's called evidence. Real kind. Not the made-up nonsense you fed the judge." The deputies looked at one another. One shifted his horse. Another leaned forward, squinting. "I say, we take it back," one muttered. "No," said the younger deputy. "We read it here." Treadwell barked. "You'll do no such thing. That's personal family property." "It's evidence now," the deputy said. Naira stepped forward and handed the brooch to Silas. He cracked the wax and unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the lines. He cleared his throat. "To whomever finds this, I, Anna Treadwell, confess freely that the brooch was given to Naira of the Mescalero by my own hand. It was not taken, not coerced, but offered in love and in trust. My father will never approve. He may lie, but this is my truth." Silas folded the paper and placed it in the deputy's hand. The silence was thick. The lead deputy looked at Treadwell. "This changes things," he said. "No, it doesn't," Treadwell shouted. "She bewitched her. That's not a confession, it's manipulation." Silas took one step forward. "I've seen men lie with less conviction, but the truth always comes out. Yours just came riding in with a badge." The deputy turned to the others. "Lower your weapons, we're done here." Treadwell reached for his pistol. Before he could draw, a warning shot cracked from the loft. Naira's rifle. The bullet shattered the ground near his boot. She stood above them all, smoke rising from the barrel. "Don't," she said. Treadwell froze. The deputies turned away. Slowly, one by one. Treadwell stood alone now, the law walking away from him, his lies cracked open under the sun like a busted shell. He spat once, then mounted his horse and rode off without another word. The land was quiet again. Not peaceful, but honest. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The fire had gone out in the hearth, but the embers still pulsed, faint and steady, like the fading heartbeat of something ancient. The ranch house, battered and charred in places, creaked with every shift of the wind. Morning light spilled across the warped floorboards, casting long shadows over the blood-stained wood. The porch railing had been shattered in the last standoff, and two of the fence gates still hung open, swinging lazily. But the silence that now held the land was not the kind born of fear or waiting. It was the silence that came after a storm. And it was honest. Silas stood over the edge of the pasture, one hand gripping the rail that still stood firm, the other resting on the butt of his revolver, though there was no need for it now. The weight of the weapon was a habit, a memory more than a necessity. His sleeve was rolled to his elbow, the wound from the firefight scabbed over but still sore. The lines in his face, deep as canyon cuts, told the story better than any words could. He hadn't slept much, didn't need to. What was important now had nothing to do with rest. He looked out at the graves. 6 of them, marked only by stones and silence, tucked into the earth behind the barn. No names, just dirt and the knowledge that men had come here to kill for a lie and left with nothing but death. He had buried them himself. Tohono had offered help, but Silas refused. If a man took life, even in defense, he should carry the weight of it in his own 2 hands. Behind him, the sound of footsteps in the dust caught his ear. He didn't turn. "You're awake early," Naira said. "Didn't sleep," he replied. She came to stand beside him. Her hair was unbraided today, wind blown and loose over her shoulders, her face pale but clear, steady. The rifle no longer hung from her back. It leaned against the doorway now, within reach but not clutched. Tohono and the warriors had left at first light. Quiet as they came, no fanfare, no farewell. Only a few words exchanged between brother and sister in their native tongue, soft, private, full of meaning that did not need to be translated. "Will you stay?" Silas asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were on the graves. "I don't know," she said. "There's no real safety here. Not for me." "No, but there's truth." She turned to him. Truth doesn't always keep you alive." He gave a dry, bitter chuckle. "No, but it makes dying mean something." They stood there, side by side, as the wind moved over the grass. A hawk circled above, distant and silent, drifting on a current the eye couldn't see. It was a strange thing, how quiet the world could be after so much thunder. Later that morning, the town sent someone. Not a posse, not a rider full of threats. Just a man in a wagon, gray-bearded and slumped with the posture of someone sent on a task he didn't want. He bore no gun, only a satchel of papers and a weary expression. Silas met him at the gate. "You, McGraw?" the man asked, voice dry as fence dust. "Yeah, I got a letter here. From Judge Carlin." Silas took it, opened it with a pocket knife, read the contents. Official words, polished language. Nothing that changed what had already happened. It was an apology without teeth. The charges were dropped. The bounty was nullified. The incident was being reviewed for improper conduct. It meant nothing. "Tell the judge we're not taking visitors," Silas said, handing the letter back. The man didn't argue, just nodded once and turned the wagon around. By afternoon, the sky had turned a deeper shade of blue, heavy with heat. The ranch had begun to settle again. Chickens scratched near the coop. A few horses grazed near the far paddock. The world was pretending to be normal. But Silas knew better. The soil had memory. It would remember what had happened here long after the town forgot. He worked without speaking, rebuilding the barn's side wall, hammering new boards into place. The sound of nails being driven into wood echoed sharp against the silence, and for a while it felt like maybe something was being fixed. But there were parts of the land, and parts of him, that couldn't be mended so easy. He didn't notice Naira until she was beside him, holding the next plank. "I can help," she said. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough." He let her. They worked side by side, sweat glistening on their brows, hands dirtied with splinters and sun. She moved slower than him, still favoring the side where the bullet wound had been, but she was strong, stronger than he'd seen anyone in a long time. "I used to build things with my father," she said quietly. "What kind of things?" "Lodges, fences, arrows. We didn't have much iron. We used what the land gave." "That's better than what most folks do." "He said the earth gives back what you leave in it." Silas paused mid-swing, the hammer still raised. Then he drove the nail home and looked out across the field. "Hope it forgets some of what I've left," he said. She didn't answer, just picked up another board. They finished by sundown. Later, they sat by the well, the same place he'd first found her, collapsed and dying. She touched the stone where she had lain. Ran her fingers over the cracks. "I thought I was going to die here." "I thought you would too," Silas said. "Why didn't you leave me?" He stared down at his hands. They trembled slightly now. When he was still. "Age or something deeper. Because I'd already lost too many people. I wasn't about to let the land take another one if I could help it." She looked at him, her eyes soft but heavy. There was no thanks spoken between them. It was deeper than that now. Something formed in the fire, in the silence. That night, the stars returned in full, brighter than they had been in weeks, scattered thick across the sky like spilled grain. The fire crackled in the pit outside the barn, and they sat near it, drinking boiled coffee and saying little. "When I leave," she said, "I want to take the brooch with me." "It's yours," Silas said. "It never was." "Doesn't matter. It's part of your story now." She looked into the fire. "I think I'll go east, maybe north. There's land out there where people don't ask questions." "You'll always be hunted," he said. "I know. But you'll never be alone." She turned to him. "Will you be all right here?" He shrugged. "I'm not made for much else." The wind picked up, lifting embers into the air. For a moment, they watched them drift, tiny lights floating up into the dark like lost souls trying to find their way home. When morning came, she saddled one of the spare horses, not the fastest, but strong, reliable, She packed light, only what she could carry. She wore a cloak over her shoulders, her knife at her hip, the rifle tied across the saddle horn. The brooch hung around her neck, hidden beneath her shirt. Silas helped her tie the last strap. "You got food, water, tools?" "Enough," she said. "Ammo?" "4 boxes." He nodded. They stood at the edge of the trail, where the path cut down through the ravine and vanished into the hills. She turned to him. "If you ever leave this place," she said, "come find me." He gave her a crooked smile. "Don't reckon I will, but I'll be thinking of you." She held out her hand. He took it. No words. Just the weight of everything they had survived, held between 2 calloused palms. She mounted, nudged the horse forward. He watched her ride until the dust swallowed her, and the horizon sealed her path behind her. The wind came again, stirring the trees, the earth, silent but watching. Silas turned back to the ranch, the weight of his revolver still on his hip, the firelight still flickering in the pit, and the porch steps creaking as he stepped up onto the boards that had weathered every storm but this last one. Inside, the house waited, quiet, familiar, alive. He poured a mug of coffee, black and bitter, and stood by the window. Outside, the land stretched wide, scarred but honest. And for the first time in years, Silas McGraw didn't feel alone. In a land where justice was often bought and truth was buried beneath dust and fear, one old rancher and a hunted Apache girl stood their ground, not for glory, but for what was right. Their bond, forged in silence and fire, left behind more than scars. It carved a new legend into the bones of the frontier. Silas McGraw didn't just protect a life, he reclaimed his own soul. And Naira didn't just survive, she became the voice of a truth no bullet could silence. If stories of honor, sacrifice, and unexpected love in the untamed frontier stir something in your heart, don't ride off just yet. Subscribe to Wild West Love Chronicles and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful tale from the forgotten edges of the American frontier. The next story might just be the one that stays with you forever. Saddle up, we're just getting started.